Thank you very much for inviting me here this morning to talk to you. My name is Gavin. I work for MIND, the National Association for Mental Health, and I'm here today just to give you a brief overview of the benefits of the natural environment, both in the upkeep of good mental well-being, but specifically today in the treatment for people with mental health problems. And I'll be talking a bit about a review of nature-based interventions for mental health that we conducted with funding from Natural England. Just to start, when we talk about the natural environment, and I was just having a conversation before we started, and mental health, we often start from a point of view of not even knowing, I guess, what we're talking about. So this is the definition that MIND used in 2013 when we published a report on this. So an intervention that improves mental and physical health and well-being by supporting people to be active outdoors. And then an example of some of the stuff. So doing gardening, food growing, or environmental work. But I think, as we'll see, the variety of the activity is certainly huge. Just a little bit about MIND itself. So we have a long track record of championing ecotherapy and green care, and I'll come on to the language issue in a little bit. And we have 140 local MINDs, so we're a federated network across England and Wales of all separate charities, separate organisations, and in our annual return from 2014, so we need to update that, 63 of them told us that they were doing some form of nature-based intervention. Probably the majority are doing some form of allotment, but that would range from that through to art-based therapy in the green environment, environmental conservation, and many other things. And in 2008, we were awarded £10 million by the big lottery to support 130 projects, and most of those weren't local MINDs, to do some form of ecotherapy or green care. And we have an evidence base that comes out the back of that, and all that evidence is available on our website. Just to start with some of the evidence, this is some of the evidence that came from our ecotherapy report, and you can see that overwhelmingly positive, that people felt that their interaction with the natural environment was a really positive thing and had a positive effect both on their mental and physical well-being. And we know that mental and physical health is linked. So good physical health is underpinned by good mental health and vice versa. But I suppose importantly at the time we also surveyed health professionals, and at the time GPs told us that 50% of them would consider using the natural environment as a suitable treatment for anxiety and depression. 46% were interested in prevention, intervention for people at risk, and 36% would refer to some form of green care if it was available in their area. And the National Institute for Health and Clinical Excellence, NICE, their guidelines for mild to moderate mental health problems, which the majority of people who go to their GPs do have some form of mild to moderate, the majority of people who go with a mental health issue to their GPs do have a mild to moderate mental health problem. NICE recommend at least one of their recommendations is 30 minutes of physical activity. So the natural environment has a huge part to play in treating mental health problems. So off the back of this, in 2014-15, we were commissioned by Natural England to look at these nature-based interventions and to really look, I guess, at why and how we took this to scale. And we did this in partnership with the University of Essex. And the report is much wider than just looking at what MIND and the EcoMinds project had done. This is really about creating the evidence and the practice for organisations to take this and to speak to commissioners and speak to funders about how they do this. I think the context for doing this is the natural choice, the white paper in 2011, but also that second bullet point. 1 million prescriptions for antidepressants are issued per week, and waiting times in psychological talking therapies. So if you go to your GP with a mental health problem, if you pluck up the courage to tell your GP that you're feeling depressed or some form of anxiety or stress, etc., it's very likely that what you'll be offered is is a prescription for antidepressants, or you'll be offered some form of talking therapy. But when you're offered that talking therapy, you'll then be told that the average waiting time is between 3 months and 6 months. So I think if you plucked up the courage to go see your GP, to then be told, great, I'm glad you've done this, but wait 6 months is not a good thing. So this is where the green environment can have a real role to play in supporting these people. So the report looked at this, and when we talk about green care, and green care is the collective term that we use for this, we're talking about lots and lots of different interventions that fit under that. And this is where I think we don't do ourselves any favour, because ultimately these are all just under a theme. So social and therapeutic horticulture, care farming, environmental conservation, animal-assisted therapy, green exercise, and others. There's a huge amount of diversity, and I think we confuse commissioners and we confuse funders when we talk about lots of different things, when ultimately what is common to these interventions is much more important than what is different. And then this wonderfully complicated table explains, I think, just a little bit about what we're talking about here. So here on the right-hand side, we're talking about, this is therapy. This is treatment for people who have a mental health problem, and the support that they can provide. And in the middle, we're talking about prevention. So we're talking about public health. We're talking about people who don't necessarily have a mental health problem. We're talking about population-based approaches, which are about, hopefully, helping people to not get worse and end up in that right-hand column. And then on the left, we're talking about the everyday activities that those of us who enjoy the natural environment enjoy. And the point being that things get more expensive, they get more acute as they go along to the right, but that there is a natural flow between the two. All of these are in the report, by the way. So the report looked at the evidence for interaction between the natural environment and mental health. The evidence is patchy. It's pretty good. We're never going to have the strength of evidence that the large pharmaceutical companies have for their drugs. Neither should we. And for those of you that are interested in this area, the public health minister recently said that the level of evidence that we needed for this should not be as should not be as stringent as drug companies, because firstly, from I guess a risk point of view, drugs, if they don't work, they can do harm, whereas there is no evidence that being in the natural environment, if it doesn't work, is going to do you any harm. But also because the evidence at this point is good enough. So it's not to say we couldn't have more evidence, but I think we have enough to drive this forward. So we looked across social and therapeutic horticulture, which is where most of, I imagine, the work that you might do would fit. Care farming and environmental conservation. They're largely similar in the ethos, and I think there's definitely an issue around language. And they're key components, and this is what's really important. What's key here is yes, the natural environment is important, and yes, interacting with the natural environment is important. But what we find is it's just as important that people are doing meaningful activities, and they're doing it in a group setting, i.e. in a social context. And I think this is what we need to be better at promoting about the natural environment. People understand that being outside and interacting with nature is important, but what I think they miss is that the key activities that are beneficial to people's mental health are about meaningful activities, giving people purpose, and then doing that in a social context. There is an issue around scale. There is no complete picture or definitive data for the scale of green care, so we can't tell how much is actually going on. Data collected is often organisation specific, and in the report we cite some data from 2003, which is ridiculous, in 2015 when the report came out. So there is a need, I think, in terms of us being able to tell this story for better data. And then language, and I think I've kind of tripped myself over throughout this presentation, because one of the things I think we need is clear language. We need to be telling people what we're talking about rather than using 15 different terms. Mine traditionally has always used the term ecotherapy. A lot of the sector uses green care. And so through the report, we did a survey where we asked people what the term should be. We spoke to over 300 people. About half of them were practitioners and half were users of those services. As you can imagine, when you speak to that many people, you get consensus that there needs to be a consensus, but no actual term that they'll all agree to. So we've decided the report makes a recommendation around the use of the term green care, just because it's simpler, and people don't like the word therapy in eco, but there is definitely more work to be done in terms of consensus and language in this area. And then very quickly, I'm just going to skip through some of the recommendations. So there are 9 recommendations in the report. I think the key thing that comes from the recommendations is the need for those of us in either in the health sector working in the green environment, or those of us who work in the green sector and are interested in this, to work together. And it sounds basic, but those of you who work in the voluntary sector or understand the voluntary sector know that that isn't something we're very good at. We need to work together to have consistency around language. We need to be clear around evidence. We need to be clear around how we can make a joined up wider offer. So there is a need to collaborate, as I said, the need around language, and a clear distinction needs to be made between treatment and public health programs. One easy way a local commissioner can get you out of their room or certainly reject your application is if you're not clear on the audience that you're actually appealing to. The report talks about registering with local online directories of services. So all local authorities under the Care Act of 2012, all local authorities have to provide a directory of service. And when we reference back to what GPs told us about the fact that they would refer to these services if they knew where these services were, this is one of the places that we need to make sure these are registered. The green care sector needs to be better in promoting and sharing evidence. There is a need for standardised measures of effectiveness. If you go into the report, the report looks at how many different ways something as basic as well-being or social anxiety is being measured. It's being measured in the evidence review that we did. Some of these are being measured in 7 or 8 different validated scales for well-being or for social anxiety. And these are, again, these are easily confusable, and it means that if I was a commissioner or a funder, I would look at that and think, actually, how are these comparable? And then just to finish with the next steps, and I guess how, if you're interested, you can get involved. The National Outdoors for All Working Group is Natural England's, is a working group set up by Natural England to bring together the green environment and the health sector to think about better access to the green environment, to think about how we can encourage the green environment to be more open to different communities, but also how we can think about how the health sector engages with the green environment. They are working on a conference around mental health and dementia in the green environment, which is likely to be in the first week of October. Had a little trouble getting ministers to commit to it before last week's referendum, but apparently they've now got a date, so I think it will be the beginning of October. So my contact details, I think, are at the end of this presentation. Oh, there they are. But by all means, do get in touch if anyone's interested, or if you Google National Outdoors for All Working Group, you'll be able to find them. There is a follow-up report to the one I've just spoken about, looking at social prescribing. So I think what we discovered is that this is neither a supply nor a demand problem. There is huge demand from individuals for interventions in the green environment for both mental health and other conditions. And there is a huge amount of supply. The issue is linking those two together, and I think the issue is, at the moment, that those aren't being linked through things like primary care. So the follow-on report is looking at how we do that through social prescribing, which I won't go into now, but if anyone's interested, that report will be published in the next few weeks. Natural England are producing a series of fact sheets, which are about promoting how the natural environment can be important in these areas. And as I say, do get involved in the National Outdoors Fall Working Group if that's something you're interested in. There's my contact details. Thank you very much.